Hey Novas, I'm back for part two of chapter three. Um, Harry had just gotten his letter, and Uncle Vernon took it from him and then made him and Dudley leave the room. And now he and Aunt Petunia are about to have a conversation. Harry and Dudley are listening at the door. Vernon, Aunt Petunia was saying in a quivering voice, look at the address. How could they possibly know where he sleeps? You don't think that they're watching the house? Watching, spying, might be following us, muttered Uncle Vernon wildly. But what should we do, Vernon? Should we write back, tell them that we don't want... Harry could see Uncle Vernon's shiny black shoes pacing up and down the kitchen. No, he said firmly. We're going to ignore it. If they don't get an answer, yes, that's best. They won't do anything. But I'm not having one in the house, Petunia. We swear when we took him in that we'd stamp out that dangerous nonsense. And then, boys and girls, in the book here, there's actually a break between the two paragraphs. And what that break tells you is that time has passed, something has happened, and you're going to a new scene. But that break isn't telling you what happened in the middle, mostly because it's not really important to the story. That evening, when he got back from work, Uncle Vernon did something he'd never done before. He visited Harry in his cupboard. Where's my letter? Said Harry, the moment Uncle Vernon had squeezed through the door. Who's writing to me? No one. It was addressed to you by mistake, said Uncle Vernon shortly. I found it. It was not a mistake, said Harry angrily. It had my cupboard on it. Silence! Yelled Uncle Vernon, and a couple of spiders fell from the ceiling. He took a few deep breaths and then forced his face into a smile, which looked quite painful. Yes, Harry, about this cupboard. Your aunt and I have been thinking you're really getting a bit big for it. We think that it might be nice if you moved into Dudley's second bedroom. Why? Said Harry. Don't ask questions, snapped his uncle. Take the stuff upstairs now. The Dursleys' house had 4 bedrooms, one for Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia, one for visitors, usually Uncle Vernon's sister Marge, and one where Dudley slept, and one where Dudley kept all his toys and things that wouldn't fit in his first bedroom. It only took Harry one trip upstairs to move everything he owned from the cupboard to this room. He sat down on the bed and stared around. Nearly everything in here was broken. The month-old cine camera was lying on the top of a small working tank Dudley had once driven over the next door's dog. In the corner was Dudley's first ever television set, which he put his foot through when his favorite program had been canceled. There was a large bird cage which had once held a parrot that Dudley had swapped at school for a real air rifle, which was on the shelf, all with the end all bent because Dudley had sat on it. The other shelves were full of books. They were the only things in the room that looked as though they'd never been touched. From downstairs came the sound of Dudley bawling to his mother, I don't want him there. I need that room. Make him get out. Harry sighed and stretched out on the bed. Yesterday he had given anything to be up here. Today, he'd rather be back in his cupboard with that letter than up here without it. The next morning at breakfast, everyone was rather quiet. Dudley was in shock. He'd screamed, whacked his father with his smelting stick, been sick on purpose, kicked his mother, and thrown his tortoise through the greenhouse roof, and he still didn't have his room back. Harry was thinking about this time yesterday and bitterly wishing he'd opened that letter in the hall. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia kept looking at each other darkly. When the post arrived, Uncle Vernon, who seemed to be trying to be nice to Harry, made Dudley go get it. They heard him banging things with a smelting stick all the way down the hall. Then he shouted, There's another one! Mr. H. Potter, the smallest bedroom, Privet Drive. A strangled cry. Ah! Vernon leapt to his feet and ran down the hall, Harry right behind him. Uncle Vernon had to wrestle Dudley to the ground to get the letter from him. which was made difficult by the fact that Harry had grabbed Uncle Vernon around the neck from behind. After a minute of confused fighting in which everyone got hit by the smelting stick, Uncle Vernon straightened up, gasping for breath, with Harry's letter clutched in his hand. And there's a picture of them fighting over the letter. Go to your cupboard. I mean, bedroom, he wheezed at Harry. Dudley, just go. Harry walked around and around his new room. Someone knew that he'd moved out of the cupboard, and they seemed to know that he hadn't received his first letter. Surely that meant that they'd try again. And this time he'd make sure they didn't fail. He had a plan. The repaired alarm clock rang at 6 o'clock the next morning. Harry turned it off, Harry turned it off quickly and dressed silently. He mustn't wake the Dursleys. He stole downstairs without turning on any lights. He was going to wait for the postman on the corner of Privet Drive and get the letters for number 4 first. His heart hammered as he crept across the dark hall toward the front door. Ah! He leapt into the air. He'd trodden on something big and squashy on the doormat. Something alive. Lights clicked on upstairs, and to his horror, Harry realized that the big squashy something had been his uncle's face. Uncle Vernon had been lying. Uncle Vernon had been lying at the foot of the front door in a sleeping bag, clearly making sure that Harry didn't do exactly what he was trying to do. He shouted at Harry for half an hour, and then told him to go and make a cup of tea. Harry shuffled miserably off into the kitchen, and by the time he got back, the post had arrived right into Uncle Vernon's lap. Harry could see 3 letters addressed to him in green ink. I won't, he began, but Uncle Vernon was tearing the letters into pieces before his eyes. Uncle Vernon didn't go to work that day. He stayed home and nailed up the letterbox. See, he explained to Aunt Petunia through a mouthful of nails, if they can't deliver them, they'll just give up. Sure, that will work, Vernon. Oh, these people's minds work in mysterious ways, Petunia. They're not like you and me, said Uncle Vernon, trying to knock the nail in with a piece of fruitcake that Aunt Petunia had just brought him. And that's where we're going to stop for today. Here's a funny picture of the behind of Uncle Vernon nailing up the door. We'll see you next time.